Hey guys, DMS3 TV here. Today I have for you the Focal Elear, a very interesting and expensive set of open back dynamic headphones. Let's check them out. Hey, here's something new. This video was brought to you in part by HiFiGuides.com. This is a tool developed by myself and several others to make purchasing headphones just a little bit easier. Everything listed on the website are things that are recommended by either myself or by Z. As always, I'd like to start off with the build, and these are well built, it looks like. Now, I have heard of some people dropping their bigger brother, the Utopia, and them getting broken. I've heard of the carbon fiber cracking and things like that. However, these don't seem to have any major build issues. They are pretty sturdy, although with that pretty heavy, and honestly not bad. There's a fair amount of metal used in the construction of these, and there is sufficient padding on top. However, I think that with a little bit more clamp force, these would ease up my concerns on comfort, because my biggest issue with comfort is that they don't clamp very much. I have to extend them pretty far out for them to fit down to my ears without pulling up on the bottom, and they don't clamp much at all, so all the pressure still ends up sitting on the top of my head, even though there is sufficient padding. So I do still end up with a hot spot, regardless of how much padding there actually is on top. Though I imagine if someone has a slightly wider head than mine, they would get the clamp force they need. Now, these also don't offer a whole lot of room for adjustment on this plane in particular. The ear cups can swivel just a little bit, but not much, though honestly it isn't really needed. You're not going to be laying these flat and putting them in a bag anyway. But across the board, aside from them having a little bit of comfort and weight issues for my specific head size, I find these to be relatively well built and relatively comfortable. So that was short and sweet, huh? Now let's talk about sound. So at the time of filming these videos, these are about $800. And with that price, you get very, very, very good dynamics. Now, it isn't all good. There are some good and some bad, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. First off, like I said, the dynamics are absolutely fantastic, and the microdynamics are absolutely fantastic. If you're not familiar with what dynamics are, it's basically it's kind of like a term used in photography. In photography, you would use dynamic range to determine essentially a camera's ability to produce light between the brightest and darkest points. In audio, your dynamic range is essentially your ability to produce and differentiate between your quietest and loudest points. So very soft and very loud sounds in conjunction without compression. Compression would be pulling your higher sounds and your lower sounds closer together, so you have less range. These have absolutely exceptional dynamic range, more so than almost any headphone that I've heard recently. Now, along with that, Soundstage is relatively wide. It's not HD800 wide, and it's not quite as narrow as the DT1990, but it is in a relatively good sweet spot. Vocal intimacy is a little bit lacking in some cases because the imaging is slightly skewed in these, and that has more to do with the sound signature, I think, as to why vocal intimacy is somewhat sacrificed in the upper mid-range. But there are some use cases where I do like this kind of sound, and that would be for things like maybe softer jazz, or in some cases maybe something orchestral, but probably not. Just mostly leaning towards things like jazz. Very laid-back listening. I would not want these for anything that requires a more full tone, and because of that, it led me to wonder what the frequency response of these is. And for a lot of people wondering, I don't usually do my frequency response testing until after I've had a headphone for a while and listened to it for a while, because I don't want that to necessarily affect my opinion. But I think that frequency response is a useful tool to help us back up our findings with physical numbers and graphs. And the findings with these is that they are relatively linear up to 1000 hertz, and past that, it turns into an absolute show. The mid-range and treble is just a massive mix of dips and spikes that really don't seem to stop. I've heard headphones that have dips and spikes before, but these are $800, and it's this much of a mess. As a result, a lot of the upper mids and highs honestly are like a roller coaster. Half the music sounds like it's missing and half of it sounds overemphasized. So it sounds both dark and piercing at the same time, and it's very difficult for me to enjoy. In fact, as much as I hate to say it, because I like some of the things that Focal has done with the construction and with the dynamics on these, I can only listen to them for 3 to 5 minutes at a time before I get so upset with them that I put them back in the box and leave them there for a month. And that's basically been my use case with them for the probably half a year that they've been here. I have been trying to force myself to use them more to evaluate them, and I cannot bring myself to listen to them for very long, which is very unfortunate because I saw a lot of potential in these. And I know there are some other people out there that like them, but objectively and subjectively, I just can't. There is just far too much missing from the music that when I put on, like I said, and I compare every video, I compare these and everything else to HD 650. When I put those back on, I can hear how much is missing from these, and I just can't deal with a headphone that is missing that much. If I'm listening to something that is not even just considered high fidelity, but anything that would be an audiophile headphone, I want to be hearing more, not hearing less. And for that use case, the Focal Elear is not the headphone for me. Now, if you do like these, and if this is the kind of sound signature you're into, there are a variety of amps you could use for them. They're relatively easy to power, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'd pick something that is somewhat fast, maybe an amp that's a little bit more mid-forward to try and pull back some of your losses. But overall, they're very easy to power, and you could run them on pretty much anything. So guys, I hope you really liked this video. If you did, please leave a like down below and a comment letting me know what you want to see in the future. And if you want to support the channel and get early access to my next videos, check out the Patreon linked in the video description. But until the next one, guys, peace.